look at us. Welcome. I can feel you all out there. It's really strange to be shooting a video and there's no faces in front of me, but I can feel you. So let me take a moment to get used to that. I really can feel your energy out there. It feels really lovely. Let's all take a deep breath together. Kind of come into your body a little bit. You know, this is the first of 4 webinars that we're doing together. I'm so glad that you're joining me here. This webinar, I'll be talking about your unique sensitivity, how to manage it better, how to develop your skills as a sensitive person. Next time in the second webinar, we'll go even deeper with that, and I'll give you some exercises and some tips that you can do in everyday life to explore your own brand of sensitivity and make it your friend, sometimes maybe for the first time in your life. The third webinar, we'll be doing a space clearing together. I will lead you through a guided meditation, space clearing your own home, right from where you sit. Which is often a really lovely experience. And then we'll wrap up with a final webinar where I'll be doing a personal energy clearing for you. And here's the thing, energy isn't stopped by time or distance. It doesn't matter when you're listening to or watching any of these webinars, it still has an effect. The energy will transform, will shift no matter when you're watching me. So you can watch these webinars as many times as you like, whenever you like. So I have a few notes here you may see me referring to as I'm doing the webinar, just because I find that if I try to memorize everything, I can kind of squeeze the life out of it. So you may forgive me for referring to my notes now and then, just to make sure that I'm on track. Each webinar will be about half an hour. I want to keep this concise and really valuable for you so you can kind of hit the ground running with the information. One of my missions in life is to demystify energy work, to expand the conversation into more of a mainstream conversation, because this isn't something that affects only some people. We're all affected by the energy of the people and places around us, whether we are aware of it or not. Everyone is affected. It's just that most of us keep ourselves too distracted as we go through our days to notice when we might be soaking in a little bit of energy from someone nearby, or when we walk into a room and we're affected by the energy there. So how are you affected by the energy? There's a few different ways. One thing is that, if you're with someone who's stressed, you will be feeling some of their stress. Sometimes you may even soak a little bit of it in. You can be kind of an energy sponge. And whether you soak it in or whether you just sense it in their energy field, you can be affected by it. Your system has to cope with that stress that you're feeling. And you probably already experience this in everyday life. You just haven't defined it in this way. When you first meet one person, sometimes you're immediately comfortable with that person and you want to spend more time with them. And then you meet another person and you just feel your energy pull back for no reason. They don't even have had to have said or done anything, and you just kind of feel an aversion, like you want to get away from them. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but there's something about their energy that's stressful to your system, and that's why you feel yourself kind of pulling back. Even in environments, we talk about walking into a room after an argument has happened and the atmosphere was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Well, that's what this is all about, really. We are affected as well by the energy of the spaces that we move through, whether it's our home or our office or the seat on the plane. There's a residue that can linger in a space. Every time you have a thought or a feeling, it doesn't just evaporate. It can kind of linger in the space. And it can accumulate over time, kind of like invisible house dust that builds over time, that can start to slow down the flow of energy in the space, or it can actually create an imprint of certain kinds of thoughts or feelings in the space. I often find when I'm space clearing someone's home that there's a little area of stress just inside the front door. And you might wonder, why would that be? But think about it. As you go through your everyday routine, as you're approaching the front door to leave in the morning, often you may be anxious about the day, or you're running late and, oh my gosh, I forgot this, or worried about the meeting you're going to attend. And so as you walk toward the front door, as you're just about to put your hand on the doorknob and leave, you kind of leave a little imprint there. You kind of deposit a little bit of stressed energy in that place. And then when you come home at night, you walk back in through the front door, oh, glad that day's over, put your things down. Well, again, you've just made a little deposit of stress from your day there. And if you imagine doing that day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, it can build up kind of like invisible clutter. And it increases the likelihood that the next time you're in that spot, you're going to feel that same way again. Now, it's not always bad. If there's a spot in your house where you've had a happy experience, then that increases the likelihood that you'll feel positive and happy there again. But for most of us, as we go through our everyday lives, we're not always so full of happiness and positive thoughts, but we're worrying, we're ruminating, we're stressed, we're thinking about something that is bothering us. I often find areas of stress in someone's home by the kitchen sink or in front of the stove, because those are often the spots where we stand when we're cooking meals and we're thinking about our day or worrying about someone in our life. And again, those thoughts create an imprint in the space. So we're affected by the people around us, we're affected by the places around us, often below the level of our awareness, but they can keep us stuck in certain patterns of thought and behavior that don't always serve us well. I remember once I was in a woman's home, I wrote about this in the book, where I was doing a space clearing, and I walked into the room and there was this beautiful energy coming out of an antique rocking chair in the room. And I learned later that that had been passed down through generations of mothers in her family line. It was full of good energy, of all those happy, contented mothers rocking their babies in their arms and imprinting the rocking chair with that good energy. That's a wonderful thing. And when you do clearing, it doesn't get rid of the good juju. It only clears anything that's adversely affecting you. Okay, so let me look at my notes here to make sure that I'm on track. Oh, also, I wanted to talk about objects. You know, we talked about people, we talked about places, but objects can also soak in energy. That's why a psychic, when they hold somebody's wedding ring, can get so much information from it, because that ring has been worn by that person for so many years. If they held a ring that that person had just worn once, they probably wouldn't be able to pick up as much information. It hadn't been as deeply imprinted. But all kinds of objects soak in the energy of the people who wear them or are around them. And some objects soak in energy more than others. Fabric is one. So your clothes soak in your energy. Anything made of fabric, any bedding in your house, any upholstered furniture is more likely to hold the energy of the people that have been spending time either wearing those clothes or sitting in the furniture, lying on the bed, things like that. If you've ever walked into a thrift store or a secondhand store that sells used clothing, you may have noticed that it feels different to you than if you walk into a regular clothing store in a mall. It's because all that clothing is still holding some imprint of the previous owners of it, their life story. And it's not a bad thing, but it's really fascinating when you can walk through the world and be aware that, oh wow, you know, here's some information in this object. Okay, let me look at my notes here. Oh, I wanted to talk about mattresses too. In the book, I talk about feng shuiing the house of a divorced man, and I went into his bedroom and was standing by the bed talking about the feng shui of the room, and all of a sudden I just got this really strong pain and tension in my jaw and felt feelings of frustration and anger, and I even heard shouting voices. And finally I said to him, "Did you and your wife ever argue in bed?" And he said, "Yeah. In fact, this is the mattress from my marriage. It's probably about 12 years old. We bought it when we first got married." And I had to tell him that his mattress was holding all those years of arguments and frustration. He said, I even started grinding my teeth after a while, which is why I felt the tension in my jaw. I was sensing what was literally embedded in the bed, in the bedding. Now, at that time, I didn't know how to do energy clearing, and so I recommended that he buy a new mattress, especially because he suddenly realized that he and his new girlfriend were starting to argue in bed. But I realized at the time this can get really expensive for people to have to keep throwing things out if they soak in energy. But the beautiful thing about clearing is you can clear it. You don't need to get a new mattress. You don't need to keep buying new things. You can easily clear it. Now, in these webinars, I'm not going to be teaching you clearing. You learn that from the book. I'm good at teaching, but I can't teach you to do clearing in half an hour. But we're going to be teaching you other things that you can do until you read the book, until you learned clearing, some things that you can do in your everyday life. And what I want to do right now is talk about each of the 3 types of empaths. If you took that quiz, that you got for free when you bought the book. You gave you a bunch of questions to figure out what type of empath you are, and I've been hearing from many of you that I'm all 3, or I'm only 1, or I'm 2. If you haven't yet had a chance to take the quiz, that's okay. You can still use the tips here today, but this will be even more meaningful for you if you've taken the quiz. So let's start off talking about that first type, the emotional empath. This is someone who is affected by the thoughts and especially the emotions of the people around them. They can be a little bit of a psychic sponge. They can soak in the feelings that other people are having, which in many ways is cool. That means that you're the person who immediately knows who's texting you before you even check your phone because you felt it. You recognized your friend's energy. Or you think of someone and then they call you and say, I was just thinking about you, those kinds of things. It's a talent, it's a skill you can learn to develop. But everything has 2 sides, and the downside of being an emotional empath is that you can have weak psychic boundaries, that you can be soaking in the thoughts and feelings of other people without knowing it and be affected by it. In Chinese medicine, which is what all my work is based on, the emotional empath has to do with someone with a big heart or an open heart, which is a lovely thing, of course. And someone with an open heart is said to have their emotions very close to the surface, and they can easily overflow. That's why I joke about emotional empaths often telling me that they're contact criers, that if someone else in the room starts crying, they immediately get emotional too. Well, it can go beyond that. That if someone else in the room is emotional, even if they're not showing it, that you can soak that in and be affected by it, and it can cause your emotions to overflow too. Now, that can be difficult because it can kind of buffet you throughout your day if you don't know what feeling is yours and what's not yours, and it doesn't matter anyhow because they're all affecting you. But it's also true that for emotional empaths, they often feel judged by other people. They feel judged as they're told they're over emotional or that they take everything personally. And here's the thing, that's not what's wrong with you. That's how you're wired, to be very in touch with your heart, very in touch with your emotions. But there's a way to navigate that in a more balanced way than you may have been experiencing up till now. Okay, let me look at my notes here to make sure I'm on track. And I'm jumping ahead here. Okay, so an emotional empath is brimming with love. This is heart energy. And they often walk through the world just completely open-hearted, which is a lovely thing. But the open heart is also a vulnerable heart. And it's often true that emotional empaths are more susceptible to heartbreak because they're so trusting, because their hearts are so open to everyone. Or they've had the experience of betrayal more than once in their life, where they trusted someone whether or not they were meant to, whether before they even could tell whether they could trust that person. That's often a difficulty for emotional empaths. Okay, and then a struggle with psychic boundaries, taking things on from other people without even realizing that you're doing it. So important to be aware of. But there's another aspect of this. In Chinese medicine, this heart energy is considered to be even more important than we in the West look at it. They consider that the seat of consciousness in the body is not the brain, it's the heart. And when someone is an emotional empath and they are more open-hearted, it is also true that they have a more open consciousness. And this is why you take on the thoughts and feelings of others. You're more in touch with all the consciousness around you. It's really important to be able to develop healthy psychic boundaries and healthy boundaries for your heart. And before we end today, I'm going to be giving you some specific tips that you can put into play in your everyday life for that, okay? Okay, so let's move on to type number 2, the physical empath. This is someone who is not affected emotionally by the energy around them, but rather they're affected physically. Their body responds. I often call these people sensors. They can sense somebody else's energy. Now, this is a brilliant talent because it means you're really good at reading people's energy. You immediately can feel if they're comfortable or not, and you can kind of adjust your frequency to match theirs so they feel welcome and at ease with you. It's a delightful quality, often very good in terms of communication in any regard. But the downside is that you can be physically affected by the energy around you. It is the physical empath who often avoids the shopping mall at holiday shopping season because it's all too intense, or that they crave alone time at the end of the day. They're so exhausted having to cope with all the energy around them every day that the first thing they want to do when they get home is just be alone for a while to recuperate. If you can relate to this, you're probably an emotional empath. Okay. So here's the thing about emotional empaths. It's very easy to go into, about physical empaths. It's very easy to go into overwhelm from everything that you're feeling. In Chinese medicine, they say that the physical empath is the person that has thin skin. In other words, the energy just soaks right in through your skin and you're physically affected by it. And it doesn't even have to be a person in the same room. You could be sitting at work and suddenly you're feeling unwell and maybe you just assume it was lunch disagreeing with you, but it could be someone down the hall who's broadcasting some strong stress and you're picking it up and your body is reacting to it. Even that awareness alone can help you about starting to be aware that not everything that you're feeling is yours. For any kind of empath, and even for people who don't think that they're sensitive, who don't think that they're empathic, of course, we're all affected by the energy around us. And so it can be really helpful to kind of cultivate that new sense of awareness about, I wasn't feeling this way a moment ago. Maybe this feeling isn't mine. And we're going to be talking more about that as we go through these courses. So a physical empath often has some physical health issues. They often have allergies or environmental sensitivities. They have to be careful about what they eat. And they too are often judged by others incorrectly. Physical empaths often are judged as controlling or picky or overly particular. And other people don't understand that it can be difficult to walk through the world and to be so physically affected that you end up trying to manage your experience by being very careful about what you allow into your mouth, into your life. You need to be extremely careful, and other people don't understand that. But there is a strong possibility for physical empaths that they can become too uptight, too careful. And there are new ways to navigate that experience so you don't have to do that anymore. Okay, let's see here. Where am I going with this? Okay, and then physical empaths. In Chinese medicine, this is associated with the concept of the sky or heaven. Now, one thing that this means is that you can see the big picture and the fine details all at the same time, which is great, but there's a downside for that as well. It can make you highly anxious because you're aware of so much and you're aware of so many things that could go wrong that you're kind of constantly hypervigilant. especially if you know that something might affect you physically. You're trying to kind of scan your environment or scan people and catch it and withdraw from it before it can get too close to affect you. It can create an undercurrent of ongoing anxiety just in your everyday life without your being aware of it. All right. Lastly, for physical empaths, they often try to choose to shut down, to not feel, to make it stop, because it can be overwhelming. It is all too much. But then you lose a valuable resource, a valuable talent. For physical empaths, you need to learn how to trust your body sense. You can't just do that immediately. Right now, without training, if you tune into how your body's feeling, you don't know if that's having a negative reaction to someone else or if there's really an intuitive message coming through a sensation, a physical sensation. Now, this is something that after you read Clear Home, Clear Heart, you'll be able to develop the skill with it because you'll learn clearing, and clearing helps you immediately know when you're taking on some energy or you're reacting to some energy around you. But even before you read the book and learn that, today we're going to learn some tips also for physical empaths to be able to manage their experience. Okay. Well, let's look at the third one here, the inner empath. Now, the inner empath is actually very different from the other two kinds. The emotional empath and the physical empath, they're affected by the energy around them, outside of them. The emotional empath by feelings and emotions and thoughts of other people, and their own emotional nature is affected. Physical empath, they can be affected by the emotions and feelings of other people, but they're physically affected. The inner empath is not paying much attention to what's going on around them because deep inside, there's this amazing resource. There's a deep inner world there. And they often have what is almost like a deep inner intuitive voice giving them messages that are good to pay attention to. And it's also, aside from this inner voice, this inside empathy, there is also the ability or the potential for an inner empath to tune into, quote unquote, the other side, those who have passed, or guides, spirit guides, however you want to define them. Getting messages from the other side is an aspect of the inner empath's skills. So this is a neat trick. It's great to have this intuitive voice deep inside. They often get a feeling about something. But there's some downsides with this as well. One of the main ones is that the inner empath is usually a highly creative person. And that's brilliant, that's great. They have very creative ways of doing things. But they have a creative mind, which also means they have an excellent imagination. Again, great, wonderful. But the downside is that they may get a feeling or hear a message and not be able to tell whether that's a true intuitive hit or whether it's just their imagination running away with them. And this is one of the important things that inner empaths need to learn in life, to be able to manage their experience and also develop their skills. This comes when you learn clearing, which you'll learn when you read the book. But today also I'm going to be giving you some tips about that. There's a few other things about the experience of an inner empath in the world. So let me check my notes here. One of the things is that inner empaths also have very powerful emotions, but they're not easily expressed like the emotional empath. The inner empath often says very little, doesn't show their emotions to other people, keeps things deep inside. And part of the reason for that is that they often feel very different from the rest of the world. It can be kind of a lonely feeling or make them feel a little bit like an outsider, and they're afraid that if they share what they're feeling, that they'll be misunderstood. So they often feel rather isolated, and that's not helpful to have that lack of connection. When you can learn to develop your intuitive skills, when you can learn to manage your experience, when you can understand, ooh, that's true intuition, and oh, that's just my imagination, then you can walk through the world as a whole different presence. So let's start now. I want to give you some tips, some things that you can play with in your everyday life. Let's start with the inner empath. One of the things I always suggest, oh, and let me back up a little bit here, because even though I'm about to give tips for each of the types of empaths, they apply to everybody. So pay attention to each one because you will be able to use that too. So for the inner empath, what I suggest is don't wait for a feeling to come or a message to come. Start using this ability in your everyday life, but use it about things that don't matter if you're wrong. Don't apply it to the important stuff. What I mean is, the next time you go out for a meal at a restaurant, pick up the menu, look at the menu, and just use your inner intuition to choose what to order. Don't use your logical brain, or don't think, oh, well, I like this usually, so I'll order that. Just kind of scan the menu and see what jumps out at you, or see what you have a feeling about, even though you can't explain it. What's the worst that can happen? You don't enjoy the meal that you get. It's not a disaster, but it will start to teach you how to know what's true intuition and what's your imagination. Another example is if you have a website that you visit frequently, maybe a newspaper or some kind of forum, before you log on to that site, see if you can just tune in and get a sense of maybe what the picture will be today, or what the words in the headline will be about. And then log on and see if it bears any relation at all to the impressions that you got. What you'll be developing here is what my friend Louise Hay calls her inner ding. That when she's right, when it's a true intuitive hit, she feels a little bell ring inside, an inner ding. And she knows that, oh, the last time I felt this, I was right, so I'm probably right this time too. And if you don't feel that, if you tune in and you feel kind of a thud, or it just doesn't feel quite right, then you probably know, oh, it's just my imagination, it's just my creative brain. So everybody can give that a try, not just inner empaths. Okay, let's look at physical empaths. Really important for you to be able to approach your everyday life in a new way. In Chinese medicine, I talked about how they say physical empaths have thin skin. Well, in Chinese medicine, they believe that the skin is the outer layer of defense for your body, also your energy. And so one of the easy things that they recommend is every day after you step out of the bath or the shower, just to use a body brush to very lightly and briskly brush down the outer layer of your skin. Just brush your whole body down. It stimulates the skin. It stimulates the outer layer of defense. It can last all day. And then as you walk through your day, that outer layer of defense is a nice little shiny field around you where some of the energy can bounce off where previously it might have soaked in. And if you're in the middle of your day and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed and like it's not working anymore, well, in a pinch, you can just dash off to a private place and even just brush down the outsides of your arms or give a little squeeze to your arms and your hands. That can help kind of reestablish this defense system. This isn't about protecting you against something bad out there. It's just about having healthy energetic boundaries. So you can allow in what will be beneficial for you, but screen out what might stress your system. Okay, so now let's look at emotional empaths and a tip that you can do. And again, this applies to everyone. In Chinese medicine, there's this lovely concept called the heart protector. In the physical body, it's actually associated with the pericardium, the lining of the heart. But it has a meaning on a spiritual level. The heart protector is kind of like a discerning energy field around your heart, a filter system that will allow in what is beneficial for your personal growth, even a difficult experience, but filter out what would be harmful or detrimental to you and isn't needed for your journey. An emotional empath has a big open heart, and it's almost as if the heart protector got stretched because the heart is so open, so big, and there's some holes, some things can get through, some energy that might be detrimental. Another way to think of this is another term for the heart protector is called the guardian of the gate. And you can imagine this beautiful spirit guarding the gate of your heart. The quality that the heart protector or the guardian of the gate needs is called discernment. Discernment means having just kind of a psychic sense about someone, about how much you should open that gate to your heart to them on first meeting or early in your relationship with them, and the pace at which they may enter. For emotional empaths, there is often this belief that you're meant to keep your heart wide open all the time. And that's not right. You're meant to be loving all the time. You're meant to be compassionate all the time. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you let everyone into your heart to that intimate degree. If you can imagine, your front door, the doorbell rings and you peek out and it's your best friend standing there. Well, you throw your door wide open because you know and love and trust them. Right? But if there's a stranger standing there, well, you might just open the door a crack, or you might not open it at all. You might talk to them through the door. That's discernment, and we need this ability as we go through our everyday lives for everyone, but most of all, an emotional empath. So as you go through your day, you can almost envision kind of like a little dial in your heart about you have a choice about how open, energetically, psychically to be in any particular situation. Maybe 100%, maybe 80%, maybe 10%, to make the heart feel safe. In Chinese medicine, heart energy is associated with fire. And there's many forms that fire can take. When an emotional empath has their emotions overflow, that's like the flame flaring up out of control. And then you've lost control when you're being that emotional. But there's another way that fire can show up, and that's the peaceful candle flame that's just very calm and flickering just ever so slightly. And that's the beautiful glow that emotional empaths can achieve through clearing and through this practice, is never being carried away by your feelings, but being in touch with them, feeling safe to feel. Okay, let's see if there's anything else I want to say here before we wrap up. So much, yes, there's so much I want to say, but we're coming to a close here, so we'll have to continue next time. Here's the thing, I want you to be aware of where your energy is right now and where your feelings are, because I've been feeling you go all over the place and processing as I've been talking about things and relating to some and thinking of somebody else with others. So just bring your energy back to yourself. Take a nice deep breath. Feel yourself centered in your heart, and then bring that energy down to your lower abdomen. And take a nice deep breath. I want you to play with these things over the coming week. See how it goes for you. See if you can relate to any of them. Make some notes. We're going to be having that live question and answer call at the end of all the courses. And so if you have questions or comments or stories, then we can talk at that time. Okay. Thank you, you guys. I'll look forward to talking to you next time.